Morning. It has been so good to see everybody this week. It has been a couple of years since I've actually been anywhere in person, it seems like. So really nice to, oh yeah, bring it down a little for the shorties. So over the course of my career, I have had an opportunity to work for some very visual brands. So I was at apartments.com for a couple of years. We had the opportunity to pull in these really gorgeous apartment images into our life cycle marketing. It's the kind that they're perfectly clean, it looks like no one lives there. And then I spent almost 4 years at the Not Worldwide. Excuse me. And talk about some gorgeous photography. It is really hard to beat wedding photography. And not only that, but we actually had an entire editorial team that was devoted to creating content that we could leverage in the life cycle space. So it's a pretty sweet spot. But about a year ago, I took a different kind of role. So I joined Caribou, which is a FinTech startup. We help people save money on their car through auto refinancing. So we connect consumers with our lending partners to refinance their existing loan. And it's just a different kind of mindset, so more utilitarian, more functional. I know there are some others here in the financial services space, so you may be able to relate to this. And we're competing in the inbox with the bright and bold retailers, the sports, the hobbies, the REIs, the Columbia, all the beautiful photography, the things that are falling on everybody's top 10 list of fun things to do this weekend. And applying for loans doesn't exactly fall into that list. So one of the first things that I did when I joined the company is I needed to assess the current program and identify what the opportunities were and where were we going to go from here. So those really fell into 3 buckets. So the first was systems. So thinking about the tech stack, the data quality, the data structure, did we have the right measurement in place? But the 2 I really want to chat about today are content and journey. So in the content, looking at what are we saying, how are we saying it, does it reflect the brand? And then on the journey side, thinking about how all the pieces fit together, how are we using the different channels, how are those channels interacting, how are we playing with the product team? So is the experience for a user from the online experience with the product to the messaging they're receiving, and back to the loop of being back online again, does that all make sense for the user? So the first thing we did is evolve the template. So this is the before shot. So we were starting with a letter style template, fairly generic, and we really wanted to make it better reflect the brand. So the brand team had actually done a lot of work to rebrand, so we actually were Moto Refi originally. And we wanted to think about the next best action, so some of the messages really weren't clear in the call to action. We wanted to build trust, so being in financial services, we're asking people for a lot of information, including at one point your social security number. So we're talking about really serious stuff here, and people need to feel comfortable. And then loans can also be a commodity, so people are looking for the lowest rate. So we needed to be able to distinguish ourselves from competitors and make sure people were relating with who we were. But here's the thing about that, is these messages were performing incredibly well. So across the entire funnel, the unique click-through rate was 11.7%. Some of the messages at the bottom of the funnel, 50, 60, as high as an 80% click-through rate. And I was like, well, let me not mess this up. Let's start there. So that's the first takeaway, is do no harm. And I think it can be hard to think of it that way because we're trained to always be improving things, right? So this is where we landed. I think the design team did a really good job of walking the line and finding that balance between creating something that better represents the brand, is polished, is modern, without overstepping into something that's going to feel too promotional and disrupt that trust. So we did some testing on this message, and when we started with the testing, we went purely visuals. So originally, we kept all the content the same because we wanted to make sure that we were treading lightly. And it actually didn't make a significant difference, which was a big surprise to me. And we also tested with and without the hero image. So one of the concerns was graphics pushing content down the page. So we wanted to make sure we were being thoughtful about that. And we tested with and without the graphic. We actually didn't have any significant difference. So then that kind of leads to, well, if it didn't actually make a difference, why would you do it? Why spend the time? So I think it's important to know your why, know why you're making a change. And it's not always about the direct number. So in this case, it comes back to those brand changes that we wanted to make. So creating that trust, incredibly important for financial services. Now, after we started making some of those other changes, talking about the call to action, making that clear, helping provide some clarity for users, we did see a shift in engagement. We saw about a 20% lift so far. So we got these messages updated about the end of last year. So they've only been out a few months, and we've seen about a 20% increase in the engagement so far. So in the next example, I have a couple that are about marrying SMS and email. So in this example, we had a standalone email. It's going out when somebody pre-qualifies for a loan. We have a big drop-off at that point, and we want to get people back into the loan application process. And the challenge I had is we weren't able to include a link in this particular SMS. So being in the finance space, there are a lot of compliance rules and regulations that we need to follow. And for this particular link, there were some security concerns with it being in the SMS channel in particular. So I really actually hesitated to add this SMS. I'm like, well, we can't tell people what they need to do. That seems kind of pointless. So I have the results, but hold that thought, because I have an example where it's the opposite. So we had an email only again, and we added the SMS channel, but in this case, we did have a link. So the takeaway is to carefully consider how the channels interact, because for a user, we all know their experience is not about a single channel. They don't behave in silos. For the user, their experience is the totality of all the touch points that they have with a particular brand. And the channels can support each other, but they can also disrupt each other. So in the first example, we had the SMS without the link. That makes it kind of hard to measure as well. We obviously know who receives it, but it's hard to track engagement. So we were looking at the engagement on the email, because what we did is we told the user in the SMS message to go to their email inbox for the link. So we actually saw a 26% increase in the unique click-through rate for the email. And not only that, but we actually saw a 73% increase in the conversion metric for that particular message. In the example with the link, it disrupted the email channel, so it's no surprise. The SMS cannibalized the click-through in the email. We actually saw a 29% decline in the email click-through rate. But we saw a 23% in overall conversion. So as you start playing with the channels and having them interact, it's important, I think, to understand what you're measuring, make sure you're measuring the right metric. So in this particular case, the first one, we're looking at an SMS message, and we're measuring that performance based on the email click-through rate. So it's different on every case, too. The other thing is, I think sometimes we might get our dashboard set up, and that's our gospel, right? That's what it is. But sometimes there are just different cases, need to think through different ways of measuring things to really understand what's taking place. So just using SMS to drive to another channel, I think was it's my final example. Another thing that we wanted to experiment with. So we have a point in the application process where we have a really big drop-off. People are being presented with their loan options. So they're seeing different rates, different terms, different offers. And a lot of people are dropping at that point. We know that one of the reasons is just decision fatigue, being unsure of what the best option is. So we decided to set up an SMS message at the point that we believe people were abandoning that page and give them the option to talk to a human. So we have loan officers that are helping any user get through the process. So to finish this process, at some point you do need to talk to someone. So we decided to try to convert these outbound calls that our loan officers are making to an inbound call, and at the same time give users the opportunity to speak to someone if that's their preference. So we started this message, and initially we had it about 30 minutes after they hit the page. We didn't want to be too aggressive, we didn't want to be too creepy, so we were thinking about that as well. And the takeaway here is to be open to experimentation. So it was a little bit different to try to take them from being online to making a call, but we thought it would give users just an option at the right point in time. So we set this up, and it was crickets, absolutely crickets. I mean, to the point that we were rechecking our systems. Excuse me. So we had set up a dedicated number for this SMS so that we could track it very directly. We were calling that number ourselves, making sure it was working. And then we started to pivot and make some adjustments. So we had it set up at 30 minutes initially. We turned it to 10 minutes. We're like, well, maybe we're just waiting a little bit too long, so let's try that. It did make a difference. We started to get a few calls, but really not many. So we ended up turning this off. We didn't get enough to make it worth managing the message over time. But the takeaway really is to be prepared to fail. So experiment, take chances, try some different things, and hopefully you are in a company culture that allows you to do that and doesn't take a punishment view if something doesn't work out, and takes the view instead that even a failure in a test is learning something. And another key point I think about being prepared to fail is making sure that you have the right systems in place to pivot and change back to revert. So watching tests as they go out, not letting them sit there, keeping an eye on it, and being able to very quickly turn that around and go back to what you originally had. So I know, hopefully, particularly for those of you who are in a space that maybe is not quite as sexy as some of the retail brands, maybe doesn't have the beautiful wedding photography, I hope you've had a chance to take away a couple of things that you might be able to try a little different. Thank you so much for letting me share.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Hold on. We kick. So, you are not free yet. All right. So, quick question. So, you mentioned you had the two messages, the one without the link, the one with the link, and you managed kind of the interplay. What you didn't say was, which one have you ended up adopting and going with over time there?
So both, actually. So it depends on the point in the funnel, whether or not we are able to include the link in the SMS message. So that would definitely be my preference. I mean, the click-through rate on the SMS message was about 65%. So really a lot of engagement with that channel. But with the one without the link, that's the one where, I really hesitated to put that in place. I'm like, that's not a good user experience. As a user, I'd be thinking, why didn't you just send me the link I need? But it actually did make a difference. So I would definitely continue to do both of those. If you don't have the option to include a link, I think it just shows that you can use that channel to actually drive back to email.
Great, thanks.
Just had a couple of quick questions on the same topic. It's Bob Miller, and I'm with Zeta. The link that you used and the issues that you were having with your legal department, interested as to what that might be. Me as a current, just when I'm working with different texts that come into me, I actually generally will not click a link in a text. I loved that you went with the email afterwards. So my first question was what was legal saying? Why were they saying you couldn't do that? Because quite frankly, it's an obvious. I'm hoping that's what it's because of spam or whatever that might be, or phishing. And the second question for me on that would be, what was the timing that you had between the text to go, say, back to your email? Because I think that is the thing that would drive me. I would definitely do that.
Yeah. So the link issue, we're actually about to solve that in about a week or two. So the issue was the way the link was constructed. We weren't concerned about including it in an email since an inbox is password protected. But an SMS is just a little less secure. Being it pops up on your phone, somebody might see it. So the links actually vary depending on where somebody is in the process. And at that particular point, the link we were using, it didn't include personal information. We obviously can't do that. But we just were concerned with it not being behind the email inbox. So that was the compliance concern. And in terms of the timing, so in both of those cases, we're actually sending the SMS immediately behind the email. We do have quiet hours on SMS, so there are a couple of cases, not in these particular ones, but for some other messages, where we'll send the email when it's triggered by whichever action, and then the SMS might actually come the next morning, depending on when somebody triggers the action.
Hey, we're ahead of schedule. We're good.
Love Ryan Phelan from RP Origin. I love the culture of fail fast. Is that a company culture? Is it a divisional culture? Is it a team? Did it have to be created? Talk a little bit about that, because I don't know that I see that a lot, or I see it, but then it dissolves into not failing fast.
Yeah, so it is very much a company culture. And I'll say, like, one of the reasons I joined this company, I knew some people there that I'd worked with previously, enjoyed working with, and quite transparently, auto refi probably would not have caught my attention. Turns out to be way more interesting than I thought. So the company culture was actually one of the reasons that I joined. We have company values that I can't remember off the top of my head, but one of them is to...
They really got stuck in there.
It is to be bold and move fearlessly.
All right. Heather, thank you very much.
Thank you.